Right, here we are on a Monday in the afternoon, and I'm looking out at the sunshine, and this looks a beautiful, almost spring-like day. But I gather you were put to the edge of your tether there, Pat, in Donegal last night.
Yeah, Jude, last night, as I was saying, it, we were apparently designated orange, but Jude, most certainly we should have been designated red. Uh, the storm last night was unbelievable. But Jude, I think we discussed it on Friday. Like that was the third storm in a week, and Jude, we have had really basically 10 days of really heavy duty ones. Now, the climate change deniers, I would love to have a real serious conversation with them because Jude, I've never lived, and I am 68. I've never lived such a sustained period of just one day heavy one, next day heavy one, the next day. And Jude, it's been going on now, what, 10, 12 days?
We talk about another storm coming in,
Yeah, so I believe.
Now, whether it'll just stop and talk, I don't know, but they certainly have mentioned the possibility of it. So that'll make four in a row, would it?
Yeah, before Jude, I think we in Donegal were on 3 orange warnings this last week. In fact, this last four or 5 days. It's less than a week. It started on Wednesday and it finished last night. Now, even at this morning at about 7 or 8 o'clock, it was still going pretty heavy duty. Now it's eased off totally and the sun's out now. But Jude, there's trees down around here. There's a couple of trees down here, and I'm hearing people. Jude, and I'm not diverting too much, but there's a lot of people living in houses around here with mica who which are where the blocks are crumbling.
Yeah,
Can you imagine living in a house last night with an orange sort of one, or which really should have been red, maybe 70, 80 miles an hour ones last night, knowing that maybe your house is not safe?
Yes, but I was going to ask you, were you out at any stage, or did it inhibit your activities? Did people stay at home during the day yesterday?
Well, yesterday we went out early and got done some shopping, come in, locked the door, and just sat down and watched television for most night.
Yeah.
We just decided we were not venturing out. That was about 4 o'clock, Jude. That we decided that's it.
You see these terrible stories about somebody who was driving a car. There was a guy who was moving a sort of barrier of some kind on the road. Something had fallen, and a bloody tree fell on him, killed him.
Yeah.
There's something.
Unless you have to go out. Like my father worked for the ESB, Electricity Supply Board in the south. I remember when other people were heading in, he was heading out because electricity lines and all that sort of stuff. I'd say my mother must have sat up most of the night during the storm waiting for him to come back. She'd 7 children, and by God, and in those days it was tough going.
We do something. This is sort of gone off the point a bit, but do you know these big pylons that carry the electricity lines?
Yeah.
They strike me as, number one, they strike me as the ugliest bloody things I've ever seen. And they're all over the country, everywhere. Everywhere we go in the country, there's these things going through fields and up over the side of hills and so on. And we accept them. There is the possibility, as far as I know, that if the government wished to, they could bury those lines rather than have them elevated like that. And if they did that, now that'd be very expensive to do, I guess, rather than use the pylons. But you never again would have to have this thing. Oh, there was a storm. 5,000 homes.
Actually, a very good point, Jude. There was a big discussion. I can't remember where it was, Jude. I need to do a bit of research on it. Some years ago, a big development somewhere, Galway or somewhere.
I think it was the cross-border one, was it? Was it?
I'm not 100% certain, Jude, but it was all about whether they should put the lines underground or overground. And I think they decided finally to go overground on the basis that the cost was so. But your point, probably long term, would be a one-off cost of putting them underground. Okay, very, very expensive, but probably in the long term, much more economical.
So obvious. And also, when you stop to think about it, they're not a bloody blight on the landscape.
Absolutely.
Really, these beautiful countryside and these big monsters stretched across.
Jude, someone, I have a really serious issue with one farm. You're driving somewhere in Donegal and there's a beautiful lake and a mountain, and then suddenly you turn around a corner and there are those monstrosities, and I call them monstrosities, like the propeller plane of a plane sitting in front of you. And Jude, they're so, they sort of jar with the whole thing. Here you have this lovely God or nature, whatever you want to call it, God created stuff. And then you have man-made stuff and it jars so much. And okay, my brother-in-law says, all right, Pat, fair play to you. I always say there's a sort of environmental, corruption and stuff like that. But he says, hey, but at least they're producing a wind and they're not harming anything. But hey, dude, they are ugly to look at.
I mean, see, that's a question of taste. I think that there's a certain, I find them slightly fascinating. And I think they're kind of elegant.
I always worried about you, Collins. If you find them fascinating, you need help. Yeah.
Okay, let's move to more serious matters. Let's move to Market Hill.
Yes.
Now, Market Hill in the county of Armagh was the place where there was a Unite Unionism rally. You may well know a couple of days ago, a couple of nights ago. And it was, I don't know, was it organised by Jim Allister or was it? Yeah, I think it was.
I think he might have been, he certainly was one of the guys.
A major figure at it. Yeah. But it was interesting because of the response of the crowd to Sammy Wilson. You want to tell us about that, Pat? Did you see that?
I thought it was fascinating in a way, and it shows what's happening. Like a couple of years back, Sammy would have been the man in the street, the sort of the true blue. He would have been. He would have topped the poll, and he would have been welcome in anywhere. A hard line, not uncompromising unionist who would have nothing to do with anything Irish or the Republic or any of that sort of stuff. He was
Leprechaun language, leprechaun language, you call it.
Leprechaun language and all that sort of stuff. So you would have thought he would have been the darling of the loyalist community, the hardline people. So that he goes along to Market Hill last Friday night in blizzard-like conditions. Quite a few people showed up, marching bands. It must have been absolutely freezing. But the minute they got up to speak, there were shouts of traitor and Lundy and all this sort of stuff. Now, Jude, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson called for unionist unity about 3 weeks ago. After that, it's quite obvious there's no unionist unity. In fact, Jim Allister had to get up and sort of ask the crowd to let Sammy speak, which must have been a real sort of humiliation for him for a start. But then afterwards, his friend on the night became his enemy, I think, the next day. Because Sammy accused Jim Allister of whipping up anti-DUP sentiment, etc., etc., etc. And, you know, Mr. Allister is not exactly behind the door when it's coming back. He accused him of unwarranted personal attacks. So, Jude, so much for unionist union. By the way, can I throw in something totally curveball here? I was watching last Sunday night, or Monday night, Jude, on RT, Claire Burns show. They did this program where it was basically why you should not vote Sinn Féin. And, you know, Matt Carthy was sort of sat down to do the Lion's Den, but, you know, because he was surrounded by enemies. But anyway, Jude, it was, the program backfired. I presume it was the establishment saying why you really, you know, we know best, you really shouldn't have elected. But anyway, what it came out was the people, it seems to me that Sinn Féin are reading the room right. They have got onto something that the people want. They're growing in the north and they're growing in the south because they are on message with what the DUP and unionism seems all over the place. And now with the May elections coming up, I'm sort of saying, is there a message going out there that the way the tide is running?
Well, I saw that program. My wife saw it first and then she recorded it, and she was saying something similar to what you were saying, that it was sort of kind of loaded against the Shinners. No. When I watched it, actually, I didn't think that was the case. I thought there was a number of people there who were really wanting to get stuck into Sinn Féin. Well, they were getting stuck into them. And they were, you know, making noises about the things that they'd done and people that had died and so on. But there also were quite a few people, you know, I would say nearly, I would have said it was about 50-50 of people who were saying that they were members of Sinn Féin, or they were supporters of Sinn Féin, or that Sinn Féin were doing things that the government certainly weren't doing. I thought overall it wasn't too bad for RT, at least, you know.
But most of the principal guests, people like Eddie Hobbs, were brought on.
Eddie Hobbs, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but you're talking about members of the audience who came in, but the substantive guests were all nearly anti-Sinn Féin. Well, then when they went to the audience, yes, some of them, and they turned out to be very articulate.
Well, I thought that I didn't really see Eddie Hobbs as being particularly prominent more than the other people in the room.
Well, Brenda Power was there, and I think she read the room because towards the end she says, "Yes, I accept I'm middle class, and I've got my own home and all the rest." I think she was a very clever woman. She copped on with him, and this is not going as everyone suspected it would.
Yeah, who was that you're talking about now?
Brenda Power. She's a columnist.
Brenda Power, yes, that's right. She was pretty critical of Sinn Féin, and she's going back again. We'll go back to an instance of some terrible thing that happened that she was blaming the IRA for. May well have been the case where somebody died, but for God's sake, I mean that book of Danny Morrison's the good old IRA, which he has reissued. I mean that it just. I mean,
I would just when politicians like Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar have to go back 40 years to find some sort of stick to, Jude, I think most young people, well, the old established parties are looking forward, and they want to deal with issues here and now. This sort of going back looking for something. And Jude, if you want to go back, you can be, there's almost a hierarchy of sort of victims, that are acceptable to the political parties. Everybody picks out Jean McConville, which was awful, by the way. But nobody ever mentions Joan Connolly, shot dead, a mother of 8, the same as or 10, whatever it was, I can't remember. The same as Jean McConville, shot dead by the British Army and left dying for a half an hour with half her head missing. If you want to pick out one victim, pick out another. And by the way, I'm not dismissing Jean McConville in the least, but there seems to be victims that are useful for political purposes and others who are not.
Funny enough, I tweeted on something similar today, not as serious as that, but on Talkback, William Crawley was talking about, I think he was talking about the fact that there was a special meeting of the Assembly over the death of Christopher Salford. And he said, I mean, we have come a long way. I mean, there was a time when Sinn Féin and the DUP wouldn't sit in the same room with each other. And I did a tweet and I said, why is it never added when that kind of statement is made? Why is it never added? Sinn Féin would have been really glad to go into a room with the DUP, but the DUP would not hear of such a thing.
Yeah.
That's the full truth of it. That partial truth gives you this idea that the both of them were loved.
Sure. So remember Martin McGuinness offered to shake hands with Ken McGuinness at the end of Newsnight one night, and they refused. It's almost as if I would have, Ken McGuinness. They wouldn't shake hands then. That's what that comes out as. But come back to Sammy for a minute now. I find it very interesting because of all the people in the DUP to get a booing from unionists for not being hardline enough, he seems the last on the list. And they were shouting traitor to him. Yeah, traitor.
In what sense did they see him as a traitor? What did he do that made him and the DUP a traitor?
Dude, I think what's happened here big time is the DUP. No, what's that? It's in the Greek word hubris. That arrogance that they came. And it was overweening, we've mentioned this before, that the whole thing, they brought Boris over and they were sort of, remember Ireland said they would have to send him to a naughty step, and they were pictured, with the, what I call it, the cameras flashing going in and out of Downing Street, and they were winding down by all the top, and they were on every programme, this small party that was keeping the government in power, and along comes Boris and gets 83-seat majority and just shafts them. And I think they overplayed it. The arrogance was there. The stupidity was there. And and I think a lot of people are in the loyalist and unionist community are sort of totally disillusioned with them.
Do you think that's what it was? Something as general as that? I can't quite agree. I think it's overall thing.
Loyalism now finds and unionism now finds itself with few friends and a real bad place. And who's the top party? The DUP. So who's going to get the blame for it?
Yeah. I think that's probably near the mark. All right, Pat. I think that they're looking for an enemy, and they found it in. You see, I think the thing they disliked most about the DUP was they seemed to be prevaricating on the protocol, because there was a time when Jeffrey said, that was okay. And I think even maybe Arlene said that the protocol would be fine in the best of both worlds. And then they changed from that. So you're getting these mixed messages coming from the DUP. And if there's one thing somebody who is a stout unionist, loyalist will not have, it's this prevaricating. You got to go in full tilt, no holds barred. We hate the protocol. No, get rid of it. Totally. No tinkering with it.
But so, here's a question from you, or for you. When you hear a hard line, and it must have been hard line because due to blizzard conditions, and these people were out. When these people are booing what you would and I would consider the hard line or the hardlinest of all hardliners in the DUP, what message do you think the DUP should be taking out of that?
Well, I think the message, Sam McBride mentioned this today when he was talking. I think it was today or maybe yesterday. He said that the one thing the DUP cannot do is they can't out Alistair Jim Alistair. It's the same as SDLP and Sinn Féin. You cannot out Republicanize the Republicans. In other words, Sinn Féin have got that ground, and you're not going to take it away from them.
And the same thing applies. That's a very good point, actually.
Yeah. So I think that the poor old Sammy wanted to present himself as a guy who's actually called in the course of his speech for unity among unity among unions.
There's a lot of irony in there, isn't it? When
all the way you can hardly hear him from the booing. I mean, really, if nationalists and Republicans had planned it, they couldn't have it better than they have at the present moment. And they haven't intervened at all, really.
Well, I know very, this sounds almost patronizing, but it's not meant to be, a highly, highly intelligent Republican, really, really bright guy. And I chatted to him quite recently. And I says, by the way, tell me something, does Sinn Féin have a strategy? He says, are you kidding? They don't have a strategy at all. He says, the thing is, they don't have to do anything. He says, all they have to do is sit back. He says, they really don't have to do anything. He says, the DUP and unionism, thanks to Brexit and the protocol, are imploding. And I think there's that was his analysis. And I think he's right.
I think you're absolutely right. The question is, will it be reflected in the number of seats next May? It's very hard to see how it will be otherwise next May at the present. And I tell you one thing, Sammy will never forget that night for two reasons. One is that he was booed by ardent unionists at a public meeting. And the second thing he'll never forget, I'm sure, is that when Jim Alistair came to take him, to calm the crowd,
had to hold his hand.
Sammy's last words were, no, hold on a minute. And Alistair just eased him aside and took over the mic. In other words, Alistair was patronizing towards.
This is my audience. Yes.
Oh boy, that hurts. That really, really hurts. You don't forget that sort of thing. So, for those who are ardent unionists among our viewers, they'll be very, very sad to hear that. And those who aren't, well, maybe they'll not be quite so sad. Okay, let's move on to something. Oh, I was going to say something different, but it isn't a bit different, really. And it has to do, you notice this one. It's about the Orange Society at Queen's University, who are not one bit pleased at an effort to promote the Irish language. Tell us more, Pat.
There's a thing, it's called a Student Orange Society at Queen's. There's a plan there, I think it was put forward by the university for the Gaelic speakers to sort of commune together. And the Orange Society have come out saying that it would be totally inappropriate, that it said it would create a no-go areas and it would enshrine the principle of segregation at Queen's.
This is the residencies, is that right?
It's an Irish language residency scheme. The whole concept, Jude, it's in Scotland and it's in the Republic, and I presume it could be in Wales as well, where people who speak the same language or are learning a language, sort of have residency together. And it's not a political decision. It's one of the reasons it's an academic decision more than anything, because what it ensures is a sort of frequency of fluency, if you know what I mean. Because you're using the language. If you all live together and you're learning Irish, and you're forced to speak it, day and daily. I'm going out or whatever, and you learn to speak it. And when the language becomes your sort of vernacular that you use it all the day, you become much, much more fluent. And that's the whole concept.
It's not even a new idea, because since I was a kid, the Gaeltacht areas served that purpose. Guys from school would go to the Gaeltacht. I'm sorry, I never went myself, but the whole idea was to go to a place where the Irish is spoken as the everyday language, and to try to seep some of that up. It's exactly the same principle. Well, similar principle with these halls of residency. So what exactly is there? They say it's going to be a no-go area or something?
As I said, this would create, I would create a sort of a no-go area for others, and that it would enshrine the principle of segregation. But here, Jude, this is what's funny. The Student Orange Society, the Orange Society at Queen's, no Catholic can apply. So do these people not do irony? They're talking about segregation, and an organisation that won't allow Catholics to join it are complaining about, as I said, about segregation. Jesus, Jude, get me a shovel to throw on the irony in that. But by the way, let me go on. Linda Irvine, who is a loyalist and a proud unionist and a proud Irish speaker or Gaelic speaker, said,
with an MBE.
MBE, and she says the objection is ridiculous. She says there's nothing whatsoever wrong with it, that academically it makes perfect sense. And she says she's surprised that she's right, by the way. She says the language belongs to everyone. She said, I think she runs this place. I think, is it called Tourist? Tourist means journey, doesn't it? Tourist in East Belfast. And she says 65% of the people in Tourist learning Irish are Protestants, or Unionists, but I presume, or a mixture of both. And she says, so Jude, the Gaelic was the language of this people, this island, long, long time ago. And back in the day where nobody knew whether they're Catholic, Protestant, or dissenter. So the language belongs to everybody. And that's sort of, I think a lot of unionists have accused in the past Republicans of weaponizing it. But by God, the unionists aren't doing too bad a job of weaponizing it for their own, their own interests.
Yeah. Well, I agree with every word you say, but I think we must face up to the fact that for most unionists, a great majority of unionists, in fact, the Irish language, if you were to, say Kajimmer Tatu to a unionist, they would think you were trying to be smart, you were trying to sort of wind them up, because that notion of the language, Irish language, being part of republicanism has been so firmly sort of hardwired into their heads that it's very hard for them to detach and look at it as a language simply that is available to everybody. I remember somebody saying, was it Garrod Carolan or somebody years ago, saying, if people say, oh, you talk about the Republicans have hijacked the Irish language, and he says his response to that is, well, hijack it back again. There's nobody stopping you from hijacking it.
Look at the track record of, now I can't remember, there was a guy who went around, he was a folk collector and a collector of songs, can't remember, and he almost single-handedly he saved old Irish old songs. He was a Church of Ireland something or other. Albert Fry from Belfast, wasn't he? Chairman of Cultus
for
years. Okay, he was of the unionist tradition as well. So, like as you say, if they think the Republicans have hijacked, they can hijack it back.
It's so silly. I mean, it shows a terrible lack of understanding of how learning a language. Leave aside Irish, it's just an appalling lack of understanding of how a language is learnt. It's learned by using it, as you say, in everyday situations. So you begin to think in Irish, or you begin to think in Spanish, or whatever the language may be.
No, but Jude, I have to admit, hey, the one thing that got me the way was at the Orange Society claiming segregation, and it was pointed out that Catholics can't join. So an organisation, you sort of go, do these people not get how ridiculous that statement they've just come out with, claiming segregation? When they won't allow people to join theirs.
Well, of course, we're always being told that. Do you remember when Leo Varadkar came up? He was taken on a tour and shown the Orange Order's various relics and sashes and so on, and he nodded understandingly. But, you know, I think it stops at that level. I think if you or I, Pat, were to turn up at a meeting of the Orange Order or some night, you might get short enough shrift. No, they'll probably like you, but they wouldn't like me. Okay, let's go to a last item. And this is a sort of an intriguing one. You know, the fact that in the South particularly, but I know in all trains, there's been, if not violence, then certainly loutish behavior going on. And certainly in places like the Underground in London, there's all sorts of accusations of people groping women or standing beside them or pressing their bodies against them and pretending it's the crowd. And they're trying to deal with that. And the suggestion has been made that there should be, in trains, there should be a women-only carriage. And that way women would feel safe from these various sex pests.
Yeah.
Would that be something you would go along with, Pat? Does that seem to make sense to you?
I don't know, Jude, like speaking personally, if there was a compartment that was yob-free, I would be all in favor of whether you're male or female. Like, Jude, I've been on buses where I went many years ago, where, you know, a group of young fellas, 4 or 5 of them, and with cans going on. Jude, whether you're male or female, if there's 4 or 5 big lumps of young fellas in there off their heads, you know, it's not a very nice situation. Now, apparently, Japan has had, as far as I remember reading somewhere years and years ago, have had women's only carriages for years, or compartments, what we want to call them. And some of the Middle Eastern countries, I'm thinking maybe Iran or Indonesia or somewhere like that, you know, these countries where for religious reasons, you know, the Muslim countries, they have had them for years. Yeah. Now, I think, straight enough, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, suggested 10, 15 years ago that there should be women-only compartments for the reason you suggest, that, you know, this whole thing of, I think there was a lot of groping going on in Japan, and the same, I think, in Mexico and in Brazil. And I think a lot of, one of the plans was they would have women-only compartments to stop us. And apparently Corbyn came up with, but the women's movement took away. He said, this is, the problem should be that men should stop doing it, not that women should have to go and sit in a separate compartment, which, by the way, is fair. Like it's the old argument, the only person you can blame for a rapist, the rapist. But having said that, you know, maybe the easier solution would be, look, hey, the problem doesn't arise if there's no jobs on it.
Well, I agree with you, Pat, completely. I would see that notion of a women-only carriage as being a good idea to stop, you know, this problem in its tracks. But I wouldn't stop there, because, as you said, you were on a bus and there's a bunch of yobs. I mean, presumably you weren't concerned that they were going to start groping you. It was just that loutish sort of behavior that makes everybody uncomfortable. And you know that you want to say to them, would you shut your mouth? But you know, if you say, would you shut their mouth, they'll probably go over and clock you on. So, I remember we were in America, and like I did a lot of transport, public transport. Now they don't take much crap on the buses in America. The bus drivers have the mirrors, and there's some ones are even policemen on. No, not regularly, but there was on that occasion there was transport police on, you know, and so on. So like, I don't know. I think there has to be someone. Jude, 4 or 5 young fellas get on in any compartment. And they start, you know, groping somebody or abusing somebody. And some of the also did some of the, I remember one of them, they started singing, you know, filthy sort of songs, you know, that sort of stuff. And, you know, they think it's cool and they think it's all the rest of it. And they're all laughing. They think it's, you know, it's rude remark, and aren't we terrible and all that. But it makes other people very, very uncomfortable. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Well, just briefly, on that thing about buses in the States, we took a bus. I don't know where it was, but we did a fairly long journey, and I got the sort of subtext when we said we were taking the bus from the people we were staying with, Americans, that maybe, you know, people sort of, it's only the scruff really that went by bus. There's people without too much money. So we got on, and I was pretty nervous. I said, oh, geez, what are we letting ourselves in for? So I got in, and this guy who was, I think, the seat behind me or the seat in front of me, a really big guy with tattoos and all. He turned around and he said something to me. Oh, jeez, my heart was in my mouth. I said, sorry, what was that? He said, just want to know, like, why have you got enough room there, bud? You know, the guy was as nice as could be. So I was expecting the worst. So maybe it's not as bad on buses, but certainly in trains, and I've had this experience here in the north, the same thing, sectarianism, and you dare not open your mouth if you're fart, you know, and it shouldn't be allowed. How you would solve it, I'd solve it temporarily with the idea of the carriages, as you've suggested, but overall, how would you do it? Hard to know, isn't it? I guess maybe, wouldn't it be interesting if you had the equivalent of an air marshal aboard trains, so that these guys wouldn't know when there was or there wasn't a cop on board, and they then could issue them with a really stiff penalty. I think that would soften their cough just a bit.
Absolutely.
The danger is, of course, it would get to you might get to the freelance air marshals like the Clint Eastwood figures. Say, okay, make my day.
Which could be on that note, Jude.
Yes, since we mentioned Clint Eastwood, I think we're going out of the stratosphere here. Okay, Pat.
All the best.
Many thanks for your wisdom again. I'm batting down the hatches there in case you can clear
by the way, there's supposed to be another one coming, and that's just wonderful. We'll have 4 storms or something. Anyway,
get some drinking. Forget about it. Right, Pat. Thanks.